Okay, we can see the assignments coming up for next week. Here we have homework assignment 4. This will be, of course, a group discussion, and journal 3 will be due, and then the timed essay exam, which, as you will see, is designed to really help you beef up your essay 1, give you a bit of practice and maybe help you come up with some things that you hadn't thought of before. So let us look at the discussion for the upcoming week. Read in this Siegel Book of Literature. This is in the book called Stories, specifically, pages 8 to 28, What You Pawn, I Will Redeem by Sherman Alexie. And review last week's reading on hegemony, colonial mentality, and double consciousness. And then in a couple of paragraphs, 300-400 words, answer the questions below. Be sure to use the key terms that are in bold or highlighted for you. The first paragraph, character analysis. Please focus on what Jackson and his Indian friends' daily lives seem to be like. This is very similar to the previous homework assignment for everyday use. So what do their daily lives seem to be like? What things do they enjoy doing? What seems to inform their values and their identities? How do they see themselves as members of a culture or a couple of cultures? Attend also to the ways in which they navigate life under white or Euro-American authority. Okay, so that's a paragraph, 150 words or so, 200 words. And second paragraph, apply your analysis to the terms. How do these Indian characters seem to embody a colonial mentality? How do they seem to embody a double consciousness? How is that colonial mentality or double consciousness their way of negotiating their lives within Euro-American hegemony? Okay. In addition, please comment on how this story speaks to the human condition, what it tells us not only about its generation of women and men, but many generations over time. This comment or claim can begin your homework or end it, but it should not be buried in the middle, which is to say you need a statement about what is the point of this analysis and what is revealed through your analysis of the story. Okay, then we have a journal assignment for everyday use and What You Pawn, I Will Redeem. Analyze the story titles in view of the stories. In a couple of sentences, explain your impressions. What work do the titles do to shape meanings for their respective stories? So pay attention to these titles, everyday use. What sort of senses does, or meanings or importance does that expression evoke? And what you pawn, I will redeem. And what does that seem to mean, this for the story, or what does it suggest? Before you read the story, what does the title suggest to you? And then after you read it, how do you find meaning in the title? Analyze the passages below. There are, let's see, passages from everyday use and passages from What You Pawn, I Will Redeem. So they've been excerpted from the stories for your analysis. Okay, so analyze the passages below. Answer the following questions in 2 or 3 paragraphs. What do the passages from everyday use tell you about the lives of African Americans in the 1960s, 1970s, which is the era in which the story was written and would have been an important time of life for Alice Walker, an up-and-coming fiction writer. What do the passages from What You Pawn, I Will Redeem tell you about the lives of Native Americans in the last 50 years? Sherman Alexie's story was written more recently than everyday use, but not all that much more recently. So think about these times and what are these people's lives like? What is going on in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s? How does the U.S. government relate to Native Americans, and how has it in history? You perhaps want to think about the types of organizations that have been set up to quote-unquote help Native Americans. Not always considered helpful. Sometimes they're considered to be agents of the state that control Native lives. They can be considered in many ways, depending on your point of view. So, anyway, okay. How do these passages below seem to represent some of the characters' acculturation to Euro-American culture? So what we're looking for here are there ways in which these passages suggest that the mindset of the characters have been, if you like, colonized? Is there a colonial mentality? A way in which characters shape themselves to suit what white people seem to want of them, or Euro-Americans seem to want of them. So how have these characters adapted their identities to fit into a dominant white culture? Does any character reject their own family's values in order to embrace Euro-American ones? Does any character keep their values, and if so, what price do they pay for doing it? Okay, so you have these passages from everyday use, passage from page 482, passage from page 488, a couple of passages here, which you can, of course, read, and so you're to study these passages and respond to the questions in maybe 3 paragraphs, maybe 2. Okay, so that's your journal 3, and that will give you very significant preparation for your timed essay exam, which is coming up. It says, please do not open this test until you read the following. You get only one shot, which is to say, when you open the test, the test stays open for 60 minutes, and then it closes. So whatever you've written in that time, that's what's going to be there. So you want to plan timed essays very carefully. Under any circumstance where you're taking a timed essay, if it's inside of a classroom or if it's on a computer, it is a good idea to plan what you will do very carefully. Okay, so the instructions say to review your recent journal for ideas before you open this timed essay. So whatever you write for your previous journal, study that and think about it before you open this test. Review the instructions below before you open a timed essay question. Oh, and before I get any further, when you're about to take a timed essay test, make sure that, if you can, preferably that your house is empty of noisy people. Make sure that your Wi-Fi connection is very strong and there's no likely way in which your 60 minutes can be interrupted by someone else. Barricade the door. Make sure the Comcast or AT&T bill is paid, because you get one shot. Once you open it, you've got 60 minutes to write an essay, and then it will close. Okay, so planning. Study your journal first, and then read these instructions. You should take about whatever time you're given for a timed essay, divide it into percents of time. 10% of your time should be used to plan your timed essay. So for 60 minutes, 6 minutes before you begin typing. It says 5 to 7, so, it's a rough estimate. Plan first, and what does that mean? For this timed essay, you want to focus on creating a meaningful 2-part thesis. Does this sound like your Essay 1 assignment? Well, it's close, yes. You need a meaningful 2-part thesis, and it needs to compare and contrast the stories, everyday use, and what you pawn, I will redeem. Okay? And it needs to use the passages included as evidence in support of your argument. So you're going to need to quote things, you're going to need to summarize things, and you're going to need to explain things. And you're going to have to not just go from your memory of the stories, but use the passages that are in the test. as your evidence. So you will, no doubt, have to quote those passages and explain why you're quoting them and explain what you think they mean. Okay, once you have chosen the two parts of your thesis, then you want to decide how to arrange those two parts in your thesis sentence. Perhaps one part could be a bit more obvious to readers. It's a nice idea to open with something that's familiar so that readers can nod their heads and go along and say, yes, okay, I understand. And then have a part of your thesis that is more surprising. Maybe it's something unexpected, some kind of a little twist, some way in which you have seen things or observed things that everybody doesn't necessarily see and doesn't necessarily agree with, right? Literature papers are arguments, and that means that they have to be debatable by reasonable people. So you need to make claims and not just obvious things, so something surprising and interesting. All right, so if you have a relatively obvious or easily understandable part, you want to put that first to bring readers in and make them feel welcome and interested. And then put the parts of your thesis together. Okay, so you could have an although nevertheless structure, or seems to be but is actually structure, as indicated in the Essay 1 assignment sheet. You want to use your thesis as a map for your essay. So whatever you say in the although part, that's going to be the first half of your essay, or first third or first quarter. And whatever claim you make after nevertheless, that's what ends your paper. Maybe it's the last quarter or half or 3/4 of your paper, as you like. But although comes first, and that maps the first part of your paper. Nevertheless comes second, and that maps the second part of your paper. Or if you use seems to be about X but is actually about Y, then seems to be about X is going to be the first part of the paper, but is actually about Y is going to be the second part of the paper. Okay, next, develop a clear outline for your timed essay. So I'm going to be practicing these things once again. Set up your two-part compare and contrast thesis, and then set up your clear outline. Only for a timed essay, you're doing it in 5 to 7 minutes. Okay. Now once you've got that, you should take in the neighborhood of 46 to 48 minutes to draft your essay. So you're using your thesis and your outline as your guide, and that will keep you from going off topic. And that is the trick of timed essays. You want to stick to your topic and do your best to prove it. Okay, and then you need to save about 6 minutes to make corrections to your essay before you submit it. So you need to take that 6 minutes to reread things and check your organization. Make sure you explained everything. Make sure that your writing is clear. Maybe you need to add an example to make something clearer. Or maybe you decide that the paraphrase that you added in your paper isn't good enough and you want to put in the quotation. Or maybe you put in a quotation and you realize you didn't explain that quotation. You just kind of dumped it in there and assume that your readers are mind readers and they're going to know what you mean by that. So wherever you've got quotations, remember, quotations have to be introduced. You have to say who is talking, you have to say what is going on, and then after the quotation, you have to tell your readers why you put it there. Because we are not mind readers and we will not know. Okay, please proceed to the question when you are ready. Open the test, read the instructions that follow, and begin. So again, as soon as you open this test, the time will start ticking. So be advised, you need to make sure that you're not going to be interrupted because you can't stop and start again. As soon as you exit the test, you can't go back in again. You only get one shot. So it's going to be 60 minutes straight through. The time that you have that you will do this, just as if you were sitting in a classroom and your instructor said, all right, we're going to have a 60-minute test right now. You would not expect to leave the room for a couple of hours and come back in that situation, so know that you cannot do that in this situation. Okay, again, 60 minutes to complete the timed essay. Right, I think that's about it. So, enjoy.